Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and it looks like the upcoming loot box content from the Waffenträger game mode has been leaked. Looks like it comes from What Express, and a big thank you to the user D. Salvez for posting it on the World of Tanks subreddit. So immediately, looks like it's coming on the 25th of September, which is going to be in just 10 days from now. And let's just get straight into what the loot box content is going to be. Firstly, a brand new tier 9 German tank destroyer, the Kanonen Jagdpanzer T3 Jaeger, or what looks like it's going to be called the Till, maybe. So what exactly does this vehicle look like? Well, the awesome Tanks GG website, we can have a look. Wow, it kind of looks almost like a French light tank or a medium tank from the front until you see just how long the back of this vehicle is. And it feels like it's changed a little bit with how rear mounted that turret design is. Almost like a 5120 or a 50B, which has just been squished or never got to grow up. Now, interestingly enough, this vehicle has a semi-traversable turret that looks a little bit like a Grilla within that regard, and 7 degrees of gun depression, which is identical to the Grilla. So just how will the T3 Jaeger compare to the other tier 9 tank destroyers? Well, I'm going to be comparing it to the other German turreted tank destroyer, the Waffenträger auf Panzer IV, as well as the other two premium tier 9 tank destroyers in the game, which is the TL7 and the WZ120G. Well, immediately we notice that the damage per minute of the T3 Jaeger is not very good at 2,355. It's outclassed by both of the other non-autoloading tanks within this regard. Also, the gold penetration on this tank is rather disappointing at 326, whereas the WT auf Panzer IV is banging 352. Also, the alpha damage is really disappointing at 420, so if you're thinking this was just going to be a Gorilla that was dropped down a tier, it's not looking like it's good news so far. However, look at this gun handling. 1.6 seconds aim time, 0.28 accuracy. That makes this one of the most accurate tanks in the game. And 0.06 dispersion when it turns the turret, which is not a lot at all. And while the moving dispersion is horrible, if you're just sitting still and turning the turret, this should be very good. Very accurate and quickly able to engage tanks. When you add to this 7 degrees of gun depression, which is 2 more than the WT auf Panzer IV and better than the WZ120 GFT, this is looking like a very flexible tank destroyer. Also, the mobility of this vehicle, it's not bad. 45 kilometers an hour forwards and a 17 power to weight ratio with not the worst ground resistances, mean that this is going to be way more mobile than the WT auf Panzer IV. And when you get all of the field mods on this and improve the ground resistances, it's going to be looking pretty sweet. However, the good news ends here as the armor on this vehicle is abysmal. We're talking about 30 millimeters on the front of the hull and 40 millimeters on the turret, which means that this thing is going to get overmatched by pretty much all guns that hit it on the hull, considering it's tier 9, and all 122 millimeters are going to overmatch the turret as well. And you know what? People are going to be firing HE at this thing's hull. It is going to be a feast for enemy tanks, if, of course, they can manage to catch it. Luckily, the hit points on this vehicle is half decent, so I guess it'll take a few hits. And when it comes to the camo, it's not really great news. It's got the worst camo in this comparison. And the 370 meters view range on this vehicle mean that you're probably going to have to put coated optics on it as well. But luckily, unlike the WT auf Panzer IV, this vehicle can use vents. So when you combine that with the field mod that increases view range, maybe at least the pay-to-win players with good crews can be able to get away without coated optics. Now, interestingly enough, for any of you who are getting super excited, it looks like it's going to have a 3-person crew, a commander who's also the radio operator, a gunner, and a driver. Accordingly, hopefully you've got a good Borsig crew or a dedicated commander in your Scorpion G, as the Guerrilla commander isn't the radio operator, and so you're really going to suffer with your view range unless you have a dedicated commander radio operator in something like the Borsig. All in all, this vehicle kind of looks a little bit hit and miss, to be honest. Having some of the best gun handling, pretty good mobility, with some of the worst firepower on a tier 9 tank destroyer, it's going to be all over the place. Nevertheless, for those of you out there that really love the Scorpion and wish you could play not quite as good of a vehicle, I'd say, at tier 9 than the Scorpion is at tier 8, but you just want to play tier 9 anyway because the matchmaking is more fun, this looks like it could be quite an okay tank. In addition to this, Wargaming are releasing the new Jagdtiger prototype. However, I can tell you there is nothing new about this tank. It's actually already out on the Asia server. It was released last year in loot boxes, and it's basically a regular Jagdtiger with just a bigger gun. Or should I say a Jagdtiger 88 with a bigger gun, or like taking a Jagdtiger, dropping it down to tier 8 and giving it a smaller gun. To see how this vehicle compares, let's compare it to the Jagdtiger 88 and the Ferdinand. So immediately, damage per minute, poor on this vehicle. Penetration is good, the same as the Ferdinand. It does have that Ferdinand's gun when we look at it. Decent gold pen of 311. Looks like it's identical within that regard to the Ferdinand. In fact, the accuracy and the aim time is the same as the Ferdinand. It has 7.5 degrees of gun depression, which is a touch better than the Jagdtiger 88, but half a degree worse than the Ferdinand. It doesn't have nearly as good gun arc as the Ferdinand does. And the mobility on this vehicle is definitely disappointing. It's going to be the same as the Jagdtiger 88, which is definitely not fast. And unless there are changes in the statistics, and let me clarify that all of this is possibly not going to happen inside the game, but it looks like a realistic leak, which is why I'm covering it today. That this 20 degrees a second tank traverse makes this thing look like it's going to have a horrible traverse speed, unlike the Jagdtiger 88. This thing will end up with pretty much the same kind of mobility as a Ferdinand, albeit with a better top speed and better reverse speed, but worse reverse speed than the Jagdtiger 88. It's undoubtable that the armor on the Jagdtiger prototype is better than the Ferdinand, but outside of a good matchup, it's still not good armor. And when you meet tier 9 and tier 10 tanks, they are still going to obliterate you. One thing that really sucks about this vehicle as well is it's got less view range than a Jagdtiger 88. And remember, the Jagdtiger 88 has preferential matchmaking. So that means that unlike the Jagdtiger 88, which has that better damage per minute, but albeit really bad alpha damage and penetration, you're going to have to meet tier 10 tanks. And so I think that this vehicle is going to be worse all in all than a Jagdtiger 88. So while it is going to be new to the EU and the NA server, it's not new to the Asia server. So we can use the awesome Tomato GG website to take a look to see what its performance has been. Well, it's only been played 1,000 times in the last 60 days on the Asia server, so it's hard to say whether that 51% win rate is real. If it is, it's doing very well on the Asia server, but that might just be because very good players got this very rare tank, and they might be doing better in it than you would expect, when the more casual players undoubtedly get it, as they're likely to inside the loot crates. So, in addition to these two brand new tanks, well, in theory, at least for the European server, the Object 283, which was a tier 9 reward vehicle that was released last Christmas in a horrible fashion, will now be finally obtainable forever. So I think this is a really good move by Wargaming. It was disgusting how the Object 283 was obtainable last Christmas. You had to get lucky with these kind of gacha kind of rolls by going up in the hills and mining out all of these gems and converting them and then putting them into Wargaming's slot machine. And there were some very, very stupid individuals who actually ended up figuring out that if they buy loot crates, then they can get excess gems, and so they can buy more rolls. Somebody spent $4,000 on trying to get this vehicle and didn't manage to get it. So kind of sucks for you that you'll pretty much guarantee yourself to be able to get this for a lot less money, as well as getting a lot of other vehicles from looks like the Waffenträger loot boxes. Interestingly enough, though, the Object 283 has by far the worst win ratio of any tier 9 medium tank on the European server. But that is likely to be because a lot of players got them as rentals who aren't usually tier 9 players. And so I think the statistics of this vehicle are artificially awful. And go and check out my full review on the vehicle if you want to find out about it. Consequently, if you're someone who has a lot of rentals in the 283, either you can wait and get the vehicle permanently, and then you can actually use field mods on the tank, or if you feel like you're a very good player, you might want to get your third mark of excellence in the 283 now, as it's going to be significantly harder in the near future, when more players can get it permanently, and then they start to actually try with the vehicle, and then unlock the field mods, and undoubtedly the performance will climb and make the third mark harder. Next, Wargaming are releasing two vehicles they previously sold earlier this year in a rare auction. The T-54 heavy tank. This is a tier 9 American premium heavy with 12 degrees of gun depression that has a horrible weak point on top. All in all, this vehicle is very mediocre, but it's actually got the 4th best win ratio of any of the heavy tanks at tier 9. But again, that's likely to be because not that many people got this and they were rather extreme collectors who are usually the more dedicated players. But all in all, with 440 alpha damage, 450 alpha damage actually, it's not the worst thing that you can play at tier 9. And it might be worth getting your hands on, if only so that you can farm credits at tier 9 or getting 100 bonds per week while playing this vehicle. Next, Wargaming are also selling the K2. This was a tier 8 Soviet heavy tank that was available the day before the T-54, I believe, in an auction. Now, this tank, it's actually way better than I thought it would be, but it's so incredibly boring to play. Statistically, it's actually sandwiched between the BZ-176 and the Skoda T-56. I think it's incredibly strong at being obnoxious in a tier 6 and a tier 7 game where those tanks can barely pen it. However, it truly struggles against tier 8, 9, and 10 tanks that can manage to penetrate it, and then it has horrible damage per minute to play back against. It's a very good tank, but it's a really boring vehicle to play. And so if you don't care about boring and you just want to be able to farm some wins or laugh as lower tier tanks can't really do anything against you, then the K2 might be a good tank for you. But most people would have a lot more fun and perform equally as well in a BZ-176 or in a Skoda T-56. Next up, Wargaming putting in the Object 274A. It's a pretty okay tank, definitely not great, but definitely good, I'd say. It's just an all-purpose tank with good armor, a good gun, but it's just got bad soft stats, bad mobility soft stats, bad gun handling soft stats. And so it's really the kind of tank that a lot of people will get annoyed by, but if you can kind of get past that annoyance, it's actually a pretty good grinder. Next, the ISU 152K. It's kind of got the old BL-10 gun. It's a half-decent tank destroyer. The M4Y, I personally think this is just a bad Renegade. It's a Renegade that sacrifices firepower to gain a little bit of all-purpose armor and its reserve track mechanic. It's honestly quite a disappointing tank for me, but there will be some people out there who enjoy playing the tank. The Senlac, which has recently been significantly buffed, although I still wouldn't recommend playing the Senlac all that much, as it just doesn't really perform its scouting role with its poor camo. The Shpetuk TVP 100, that is a great tank destroyer. Wonderful to play, crazy high damage per minute, insanely high damage per minute with its high explosive rounds, great for frontline. The CS52 Lease, the Polish T44, effectively, it's just a solid all-round tank. And if you have a CS63, then maybe the CS52 will be great for crew training your Polish mediums. And the Stridsvagn 81, this is a non-skinned version of the Prima Victoria. It recently got buffed, but it's still so mediocre. I would never recommend playing this one. The Centurion 5-1 is the better tank. I will say, however, that there are far less stinkers to get in this series of loot boxes. And I'd say that all in all, this looks like a pretty promising set of loot boxes if you're looking for some half-decent tanks. And it's bizarre to me that there are going to be 2 tier 9 premium tanks, including one new one in these boxes. Next, I want to highlight the real exciting news for a lot of players, and that it looks like rental games for the Waffenträger Alfie 100 in the random queue will be coming back. Last year, you could get 50 games. Let's see if Wargaming do the same thing. What that means is that if any of you out there are trying to either experience the Waffenträger Alfie 100 like it used to be, well, unfortunately you can't, because it has been substantially nerfed since those days, but at least you can get like a vague inkling of a memory once again. And also for any of you out there who are trying to get marks of excellence, this will be a good opportunity for you to finally get your third mark of excellence in the WT Alfie 100. Or alternatively, if any of you out there want to farm Waffenträger Alfie 100s, then maybe you want to try and target playing possibly some light tanks to spot them, as they're very easy to spot and very easy to pen. Autoloaders with high explosive rounds can also do very well against Waffenträger Alfie 100s. So get ready. It looks like on September the 25th, things are about to get a little bit funky again in World of Tanks. And I want to finish this video by saying that this could literally be a complete baited leak. All of it could be absolute lies and slander, but it looks realistic enough for me that I trust this source. And so I wanted to jump in to let you know, if any of you were thinking about buying these tanks, there might be a good opportunity to get them cheaper very soon. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it today. Once again, a big thank you to D. Sarvez for posting this on the World of Tanks subreddit. Really hope you enjoyed this breakdown. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And let me know in the comments what you think about all of these vehicles, especially what I think is the Kanonen Jagdpanzer T3 Jaeger. Do you think it looks great or do you think it looks awful? And if you're watching this video as it's released on Friday, I'm going live all day on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby with brand new drops to be able to help you get towards the Ram 2 or the M485. So come along, get some fat loot and check out hopefully some at least reasonably good games. So really looking forward to seeing you all live right now. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic and hopefully I'll see you soon.